please don't say that it's too late for us. I can't accept that.
My dear, we both knew this moment would come eventually, but not like this. There has to be another way.
The Ashford Cultural Center glowed like a jewel box on that crisp October evening. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors while Manhattan's elite gathered in designer gowns and tailored suits. Waiters glided through the crowd carrying champagne flutes that sparkled like liquid stars. Everyone had come to celebrate art, culture, and generosity, but mostly they had come to see and be seen. Theodore Ashford sat near the back of the grand ballroom, partially hidden behind a column of Italian marble. His wheelchair, a masterpiece of German engineering worth more than most cars, felt like an anchor keeping him tethered to the ocean floor. At 36, he had built an empire in artificial intelligence that changed how the world communicated. His company, Nexus Technologies, had made him a billionaire before he turned 30. But none of that mattered anymore. Not since the accident 3 years ago that stole his ability to walk and took something far more precious than his legs. A performance that pierces the soul. The lights dimmed and conversations faded to whispers. A spotlight illuminated the stage where a young woman stood perfectly still. Sienna Brooks wore a simple black leotard, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked small against the vast stage, vulnerable yet somehow powerful. Theodore recognized the opening notes immediately. His chest tightened as the music began. This was Requiem for Tomorrow, the piece Julian had been rehearsing the night everything fell apart. Julian Torres had been more than Theodore's best friend. They had built Nexus together, sharing dreams in cramped apartments and celebrating victories in boardrooms. Julian loved dance the way Theodore loved code, with absolute devotion. When Julian decided to sponsor a new arts foundation, Theodore had insisted on being their opening night. Neither of them knew the lighting rig above the stage had faulty supports. Sienna moved across the stage with raw honesty. Her body told a story of loss and survival, of falling and rising again. Each gesture seemed to pull memories from Theodore's carefully locked vault. He saw Julian's face in those final moments. The shower of sparks. The screaming metal. Julian pushing Theodore's wheelchair out of the way as the structure collapsed. The sickening crunch of impact. When two souls recognize each other. Theodore's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair until his knuckles turned white. His legs began their familiar trembling, the involuntary spasms that doctors promised would improve but never did. Sweat formed along his hairline despite the cool temperature. Around him, the audience sat mesmerized by the performance, but Theodore was drowning in his own private hell. Sienna spun into a final series of movements that seemed impossible for a human body to achieve. She landed in a crouch, head bowed, one arm extended toward the audience. Toward Theodore. The music stopped. Silence wrapped the room like a held breath. Then applause erupted, thunderous and emotional. People rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Everyone except Theodore, who remained frozen in his chair, trapped in the past. The crowd began moving toward the reception area, but Sienna remained on stage, her eyes scanning the dispersing audience. When her gaze landed on Theodore, something shifted in her expression. Recognition perhaps, or understanding. Before Theodore could process what was happening, she descended from the stage and walked directly toward him. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Whispers rippled through the remaining guests like wind through wheat fields. Theodore wanted to disappear, to roll his chair backward into the shadows, but his body refused to cooperate. Sienna knelt before him, bringing herself to his eye level in a gesture so deliberate it stole his breath. Her voice was soft but clear. "You knew Julian Torres." It was not a question. Theodore's jaw worked but no sound emerged. How could this stranger possibly know? Sienna's eyes held no pity, only a deep understanding that terrified him. "I was his student," she continued. "He taught me this piece 2 months before he died. He said it was about transformation, about becoming something new after everything you knew was destroyed." Theodore finally found his voice, though it came out rough and damaged. You should not have danced that here. Not tonight. Not where I could see it. Sienna shook her head slowly. I danced it because you needed to see it. Because Julian would have wanted you to remember that life continues, even after tragedy tears us apart. You know nothing about what I need, Theodore said, but the words lacked conviction. Something in Sienna's steady gaze made his carefully constructed walls feel thin as paper. I know what it feels like to lose everything, Sienna replied. I know how it feels when your body betrays you and the world moves on without asking if you are ready. I know because 3 years ago, my dance partner dropped me during a performance. I shattered my ankle in 7 places. Doctors said I would never dance professionally again. Theodore looked at her properly for the first time. He saw the slight unevenness in how she balanced, the faint scar peeking above her left shoe. He saw strength born from suffering, resilience forged in fire. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Sienna stood, graceful despite her hidden injury. Because tomorrow morning, if you are willing, I would like to help you remember what your body can still do. Not to walk again, though maybe that will come. But to feel alive again. To stop seeing your wheelchair as a prison and start seeing it as simply where you are right now, not where you will always be. The seed of possibility. She placed a card in his hand. A simple white card with her name and phone number. Nothing more. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Theodore sitting in the emptying ballroom with his heart pounding and his mind racing. The trembling in his legs had stopped. He had not noticed when. Theodore looked down at the card in his hand. Sienna Brooks. 7 letters that might change everything or nothing at all. Around him, staff began clearing glasses and folding chairs, restoring order to the beautiful chaos of the evening. But inside Theodore's chest, something long dormant stirred. It felt dangerous. It felt terrifying. It felt like hope. As his assistant appeared to help him to his car, Theodore slipped the card into his jacket pocket. He did not know if he would call her. He did not know if he could survive hoping again. But for the first time in 3 years, Theodore Ashford made it through an entire evening without wishing he had died instead of Julian. That had to count for something. That had to mean something was changing, even if he did not understand what yet. The city lights blurred past the car window as they drove through Manhattan streets. Theodore closed his eyes and saw Sienna dancing, her body telling stories his heart had forgotten how to hear. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow he would decide. But deep down, he already knew the decision had been made the moment she knelt before him and saw not a broken billionaire, but a man who had forgotten he was still alive. Theodore woke at dawn with Sienna's card still in his jacket pocket. He had not slept well. Dreams of Julian mixed with images of the dancer moving across the stage, her body speaking a language Theodore had forgotten he understood. His penthouse apartment stretched 60 floors above Central Park, all glass and steel and expensive emptiness. The morning sun painted orange stripes across the hardwood floors, but Theodore felt none of its warmth. His assistant, Robert Chen, arrived at 7 with coffee and the morning briefings. Robert had been with Theodore since the beginning of Nexus Technologies, transitioning seamlessly from business partner to the careful manager of Theodore's new reality. He never pitted, never coddled, and never asked questions Theodore did not want to answer. Until this morning. You kept her card, Robert said, noticing the white rectangle on the side table. His tone remained neutral, but Theodore heard the curiosity underneath. Theodore transferred himself from bed to wheelchair with practiced efficiency. 3 years had made the movement automatic, mechanical. She knew Julian. She was his student. Robert paused in organizing the morning newspapers. Julian had many students. He believed in nurturing talent. But none of them have approached you before. She said she could help me feel alive again. The words sounded absurd in the morning light, naive and desperate. Theodore immediately regretted speaking them aloud. But Robert simply nodded. Then perhaps you should let her try. The board meeting is not until Thursday. You have time. Sienna's world of beautiful struggle. Across town in a modest studio apartment in Brooklyn, Sienna was teaching her morning class. 5 students ranging from 19 to 67 moved through gentle stretches on yoga mats. These were not professional dancers. They were people recovering from surgery, managing chronic pain, learning to inhabit their bodies again after trauma had made them strangers in their own skin. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher with replacement knees, struggled to extend her leg. Sienna knelt beside her, hands gentle but firm. Your body remembers more than your mind believes. Trust the memory living in your muscles. Mrs. Patterson managed another inch. Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from the small victory of movement regained. Sienna understood. Every inch mattered when you had lost miles. After class, Sienna sat alone in her studio, staring at her phone. She had given Theodore her number last night in a moment of impulse she still could not fully explain. Something in his eyes had called to her, a recognition so deep it bypassed logic entirely. She knew that look. She had seen it in her own mirror for months after the accident that should have ended her career. Her phone remained silent. Sienna told herself this was expected, reasonable. Theodore Ashford was a billionaire, a genius, a man who probably had teams of medical professionals already. He did not need a former dancer teaching movement therapy in a Brooklyn studio that smelled like lavender and old wood. But Julian's voice echoed in her memory, something he had said during their last conversation before his death. The body knows truths the mind refuses to acknowledge. Movement does not lie. When you dance, Sienna, you tell the most honest story in the world. The call that changes everything. Theodore stared at his phone for 20 minutes before finally dialing. Each number felt like a commitment he was not sure he could keep. The phone rang twice before Sienna answered. This is Sienna. Her voice sounded different than he remembered. Lighter somehow, touched with morning sunshine. Theodore cleared his throat. This is Theodore Ashford. From last night. You gave me your card. I remember. A pause. I hoped you would call, but I was not certain you would. I am not certain why I am calling, Theodore admitted. Honesty felt strange on his tongue after years of careful corporate speak and managed public statements. You said you could help me. But help me do what exactly? I have had physical therapists, doctors, specialists. Everyone promising improvement that never comes. Sienna's response came slowly, thoughtfully. I am not promising you will walk again. I cannot make that promise. What I offer is different. Somatic therapy helps you reconnect with your body not as something broken that needs fixing, but as something alive that needs listening to. Your legs may never work the way they did before. But they still have sensation, still have memory, still have a story to tell if you are willing to hear it. Theodore felt his chest tighten. That sounds like therapy talk. Like meaningless inspiration for people who need false hope to get through the day. It sounds that way because you are terrified, Sienna said, her voice gentle but unflinching. Not of me or of the work. You are terrified that you might feel something again and discover that feeling is worse than numbness. The accuracy of her words hit Theodore like a physical blow. He wanted to hang up. He wanted to retreat behind his walls where everything was controlled and manageable. Instead, he found himself asking, when can you start? The first session begins. Sienna arrived at Theodore's penthouse at 2 in the afternoon. Robert showed her to the library, a room Theodore had converted into a private space away from the clinical atmosphere of medical equipment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the park. Books lined every wall. A grand piano sat in the corner, untouched since before the accident. Theodore waited near the window, his wheelchair positioned so the light fell across his face. He looked exhausted, haunted. Sienna noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the armrests like anchors keeping him from floating away into nothing. "Thank you for letting me come," she said, setting down her bag. She wore simple clothes, leggings and a loose shirt, her hair in a practical braid. No performance costume today. Just two people in a room, about to do difficult work. Theodore gestured vaguely at the space. "I had Robert clear out the furniture. I was not sure what you would need. This is perfect." Sienna moved to the center of the room, her movements economical and purposeful. "Before we begin, I need to explain something. This work requires trust. I will ask you to do things that feel uncomfortable, maybe even frightening. Your body has been holding trauma for 3 years. When we start to release that, emotions will surface. Anger, grief, fear, maybe all three at once." "I am already angry," Theodore said flatly. "I am already grieving. What difference does acknowledging it make?" Sienna knelt before his wheelchair, her eyes level with his. "The difference between drowning and swimming. Both involve water. Only one lets you breathe." Breaking through the first wall. The session began simply. Sienna asked Theodore to transfer to a padded mat on the floor. This alone took 15 minutes, not because Theodore lacked the strength, but because lowering himself to the ground felt like surrender. On the floor, he became more vulnerable, more exposed. His wheelchair, at least, gave him height, gave him dignity. Sienna sat across from him, close but not touching. "Tell me about the accident. Not the facts I can read in news articles. Tell me what your body remembers." Theodore's jaw clenched. "I do not talk about that night." "Then do not talk. Show me." Sienna placed her hands palm up between them, an invitation. "Close your eyes. Go back to that moment. Where in your body do you feel it first?" Against his better judgment, Theodore closed his eyes. Immediately, he was back in the theater. The weight of the evening air. The excitement in Julian's voice as he explained the technical aspects of the new lighting system. Then the groan of metal, the shower of sparks, Julian's hands on his wheelchair pushing him to safety. "My chest," Theodore heard himself say. "Everything starts in my chest. Tightness like I cannot breathe." "Stay with that feeling," Sienna instructed softly. "Where does it go next?" "My legs. They start shaking. They always shake when I remember." Theodore's breath came faster now, shallow and panicked. "I cannot control it. I cannot make it stop." "You are not supposed to stop it." Sienna's voice remained steady, an anchor in the storm. "Your body is trying to complete a response that got interrupted. When the accident happened, your nervous system prepared to run, to fight, to survive. But you could not. The energy got trapped. It has been trapped for 3 years." Theodore's eyes snapped open. "How do you know that?" Sienna's expression held deep compassion. "Because the same thing happened to me. After my partner dropped me, my hands would shake uncontrollably whenever I heard music. My body kept trying to dance, kept trying to catch myself from a fall that already happened. It took me 8 months to understand that I was not broken. I was stuck in a moment that needed completion. The moment of breakthrough." Sienna asked permission before touching Theodore's legs. He nodded, though every muscle in his body screamed resistance. Her hands rested gently on his left thigh, warm and steady. Theodore flinched. Not from pain, but from the intimacy of contact, from letting someone witness his brokenness this closely. "Breathe into my hands," Sienna instructed. "Imagine your breath traveling down through your body, meeting your legs exactly where they are." Theodore tried. His breath stuttered and caught. His legs trembled harder. Frustration burned through him like acid. "This is pointless. I cannot feel anything below my knees. What is the purpose of breathing into numbness?" The purpose, Sienna said quietly, is that numbness is not nothing. Numbness is your body's way of protecting you from overwhelming sensation. But protection can become a prison. We are teaching your body that it is safe to feel again. She began gentle massage, working the muscles with skilled precision. Theodore's breathing grew ragged. His hands formed fists. Then suddenly, unexpectedly, a sensation shot through his left calf. Not pain exactly, but presence. A tingling awareness that felt like electrical current moving through long dead wires. Theodore gasped. What was that? Sienna's eyes lit with quiet triumph. That was your body waking up. Just a little. Just enough to remind you that it is still here, still trying, still hoping even when you have stopped. The walls begin to crack. Something broke inside Theodore at those words. 3 years of controlled composure shattered like glass under pressure. His shoulders shook. His breath came in gulps. He was crying, actually crying, for the first time since Julian's funeral. The tears felt like betrayal and relief in equal measure. Sienna did not try to stop him or comfort him with empty platitudes. She simply stayed present, one hand still resting on his leg, bearing witness to his pain without trying to fix it. When the storm finally passed, Theodore felt hollowed out and strangely lighter. I apologize, he managed. That was unprofessional. That was human, Sienna corrected. And it was exactly what needed to happen. Theodore looked at her through exhausted eyes. Why are you doing this? You do not know me. I could be anyone. Sienna smiled, sad and understanding. Julian talked about you constantly. His brilliant friend who could solve impossible problems but could not see his own worth. He said you measured your value by what you could do, not who you were. After the accident, I imagine that became impossible math. Julian told you about me? Theodore felt exposed in an entirely new way. He cared about you deeply. He would have wanted someone to remind you that you are still the same person, wheelchair or not. Your value never came from your ability to walk. It came from your mind, your heart, your stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Sienna stood, gathering her things. That is enough for today. Your nervous system needs time to process what just happened. The seed takes root. As Sienna prepared to leave, Theodore found himself asking, will you come back tomorrow? She paused at the door, turning back with a gentle smile. If you want me to. I do. The admission cost him, but felt necessary. I felt something today. Not just in my leg. Something shifted inside me. I do not understand it yet, but I think I need to. Understanding comes later, Sienna said. For now, just feel. Just be present with whatever arises. And Theodore? What happened today took immense courage. Do not diminish it by calling it weakness. After she left, Theodore remained on the floor for a long time, staring at the ceiling, processing sensations and emotions he had kept locked away for years. His legs still did not work. Nothing had fundamentally changed. Yet everything felt different. Robert found him there an hour later. Sir, shall I help you back to your chair? Theodore nodded, but before Robert could move, he asked, do you believe people can change, Robert? Really change, not just adapt to circumstances? Robert considered the question seriously. I believe people can heal. And healing always looks like change. That night, Theodore slept better than he had in 3 years. He dreamed of dancing, not as something lost, but as something waiting patiently for him to remember its language. When he woke, Sienna's card still sat on his nightstand, but now it felt less like a question and more like a promise. Something had begun. Something fragile and terrifying and precious. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but for the first time since the accident, Theodore was willing to find out. 3 weeks passed in a pattern that became sacred ritual. Every afternoon at 2, Sienna arrived at Theodore's penthouse. Every session pushed deeper into the territory where physical therapy ended and soul work began. Theodore's body was remembering itself slowly, painfully, beautifully. The tremors that once signaled panic now sometimes indicated breakthrough. Sensation crept back into places that had been silent for years, not everywhere, not predictably, but enough to remind him that his body still held possibilities. But something else was growing between them, something neither had anticipated and both were trying desperately to ignore. The way Theodore's breath caught when Sienna entered the room had nothing to do with anxiety. The way Sienna's hands lingered a moment too long during session spoke a language beyond therapy. They were falling, and falling felt dangerous when so much healing still hung in the balance. Robert noticed first. He had watched Theodore transform over these weeks from a man hiding in shadows to someone engaging with life again. Theodore smiled now, sometimes laughed. He took calls in rooms with open curtains. He had started playing piano again, filling the penthouse with music for the first time since the accident. But Robert also saw the way Theodore tracked Sienna's movements, the way his entire energy shifted when she was near. "You are getting attached," Robert said one morning, his tone careful but concerned. "To the therapy or to the therapist?" Theodore stared into his coffee. "Does it matter? She is helping me. That is what matters. It matters if your heart is healing faster than your body can keep up." Robert set down the morning paper. "What happens when the sessions end? When she has done all she can do?" Theodore had no answer. He had been living session to session, moment to moment, not daring to imagine beyond the next afternoon. But Robert's question planted seeds of fear that grew like weeds in fertile soil. When the world takes notice. The media discovered them on a Thursday afternoon in late November. Theodore had convinced Sienna to meet him at a private garden in Central Park, a location his family foundation maintained for accessibility events. He wanted to show her his progress, to practice the assisted standing exercises outside the confines of his apartment. With Robert's help and specialized braces, Theodore could stand for brief periods now, bearing some weight through his legs. It was not walking, but it was movement, progress, hope taking physical form. Sienna stood in front of him, hands ready to steady if needed, her face glowing with pride as Theodore held himself upright for nearly 30 seconds. In that moment, focused entirely on each other, neither noticed the photographer with the telephoto lens hidden behind a cluster of trees. By evening, the photos were everywhere. Headlines screamed across gossip sites and business news platforms alike. Billionaire Theodore Ashford's secret romance with mystery woman. Ashford standing again, love or therapy? From tragedy to love story, Theodore Ashford moves on. The photos showed Theodore standing, Sienna's hands on his arms, their faces close together, expressions intimate and unguarded. To the world, it looked like a romantic moment between lovers. The truth was more complicated, more fragile, more real than any headline could capture. Theodore's phone exploded with calls. His mother, Victoria Ashford, left 7 voicemails before he finally answered. Her voice dripped with controlled fury. "Theodore James Ashford, what are you thinking? That woman is clearly taking advantage of your vulnerability. I have had her investigated. She is nobody, a failed dancer teaching yoga in Brooklyn. This is beneath you. Beneath our family. Her name is Sienna Brooks," Theodore said, his voice cold and steady. "She knew Julian. She is helping me heal. And my personal life is not subject to your approval. Everything you do affects this family," Victoria shot back. "The foundation, the company, our reputation. I will not stand by and watch you throw away your dignity for some opportunist who saw a wealthy target." Theodore ended the call. His hands shook with anger, but underneath the anger was fear. What if his mother was right? What if Sienna was helping him because she saw opportunity, not because she cared? What if everything he had started to feel was just another symptom of his brokenness, desperately attaching to the first person who showed him kindness. Sienna's own fears surface. Sienna sat in her Brooklyn apartment staring at the same photos, reading the same cruel headlines. Comment sections overflowed with speculation and judgment. Some people celebrated the apparent love story. Others accused her of exploitation, gold digging, using a disabled man's vulnerability for personal gain. Her phone rang constantly until she finally turned it off. Her best friend, Monica Reeves, arrived within the hour, carrying wine and Chinese food. Monica had been Sienna's roommate during their Performing Arts Academy days, the one who held her through the darkest months after the accident. "Forget those people," Monica said, unpacking containers of noodles. "They do not know you. They do not know what you and Theodore have been building." "What have we been building?" Sienna asked, her voice small and uncertain. "I thought I was helping him heal. But Monica, somewhere along the way, it became more. I started looking forward to our sessions not because of the work, but because I wanted to see him. I started touching him longer than necessary. I started imagining futures I have no right to imagine." Monica set down her fork, her expression serious. "Do you love him?" The question hung in the air like a confession waiting to be spoken. Sienna felt tears burn behind her eyes. "I think I might. But how can that be real? How can I trust my own feelings when the whole foundation of our relationship is built on his trauma and my role as his therapist? What if I am just as opportunistic as everyone thinks?" "You are the least opportunistic person I know," Monica said firmly. "You could have capitalized on knowing Julian Torres years ago. You could have leveraged that connection into teaching positions, performances, publicity. You chose to work with people nobody else wanted to help, in a studio you can barely afford, because you care about healing more than success. If you love Theodore, it is not because of his money. It is because you saw his soul when everyone else only saw his wheelchair." But Sienna's doubts had taken root. That night, she drafted a message to Theodore, explaining that perhaps they needed to take a break from the sessions. She typed and deleted it 7 times before finally giving up and crying herself to sleep. The confrontation. Theodore did not wait for Sienna to pull away. The next afternoon, he showed up at her Brooklyn studio unannounced. Robert had driven him, helping navigate the wheelchair up the building's front steps that were decidedly not ADA compliant. Theodore waited until Sienna's morning class ended, watching through the window as she guided her students through gentle movements with patience and grace. When the last student left, Theodore wheeled himself inside. Sienna turned, surprise and something like fear flashing across her face. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "After those photos, people will be watching. This will only make things worse." "Let them watch," Theodore said. "I need to know something, and I need you to answer honestly. Has anything between us been real? Or have I been so desperate for connection that I invented feelings that do not exist?" Sienna sank onto a folding chair, her strength suddenly gone. "Everything has been real. Every moment, every breakthrough, every session. But Theodore, I am supposed to be helping you heal, not complicating your life with feelings that could damage both of us. What if I want the complication?" Theodore wheeled closer, his eyes intense and vulnerable. "What if the healing and the feelings are not separate things? You made me believe I was still alive, still worth something beyond my achievements. You saw me, really saw me, when I had forgotten how to see myself. How is that not real?" Sienna's hands twisted in her lap. "Your mother called me this morning. She offered me money to stop seeing you. When I refused, she threatened to destroy my reputation, claim I was practicing therapy without proper credentials, get my studio shut down. She said I was preying on your vulnerability." Theodore's face hardened with fury. "My mother has no right to interfere. I will handle her. But what if she is right?" Sienna's voice broke. "What if I have crossed lines I should not have crossed? What if my feelings for you compromise my ability to help you? You still have so much healing left to do. What if being with me prevents that? The grand gesture. Theodore reached forward and took Sienna's hands, his grip firm despite the tremor. 3 months ago, I was a ghost living in an expensive tomb. I had given up on feeling anything beyond obligation and guilt. Then you walked into my life and reminded me that my body is not my enemy. That sensation, even painful sensation, means I am alive. You did not fix me, Sienna. You showed me I was never broken in the first place, just trapped in a story I was telling myself about what my life could be. Tears streamed down Sienna's face. I am scared, Theodore. I am scared of hurting you. I am scared of losing my professional integrity. I am scared that loving you means I cannot help you anymore. Then let someone else help me with the physical therapy, Theodore said. I will find another specialist, someone clinical and detached. But Sienna, what you have given me goes beyond muscle memory and nerve response. You taught me to be vulnerable again. To trust again. To hope again. Losing that, losing you, would destroy me more completely than any accident ever could. Sienna looked at their joined hands, his pale skin against her darker complexion, both scarred in their own ways, both stronger for the breaking. Your family will never accept me. Society will always question my motives. The media will turn our story into something cheap and sensational. I know, Theodore said. But I also know that I would rather face all of that with you than face another day in the safe, controlled, empty existence I built after Julian died. You are the first person since the accident who looked at me and saw possibility instead of tragedy. If you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then we owe it to ourselves to find out where this leads. The choice that changes everything. Sienna stood, pulling Theodore to his feet with practiced support. He wobbled but held steady, his legs bearing weight they had not supported in years. They stood face to face, breathing each other's air, suspended in a moment that would define everything that followed. I love you, Sienna whispered. I did not mean to. I tried not to. But I love you, Theodore Ashford, and that terrifies me more than anything I have ever faced. Theodore reached up and cupped her face with trembling hands. I love you too. I have loved you since the moment you knelt before me at that gala and saw through every wall I had built. Stay with me. Not as my therapist. As my partner. As the person who reminds me every day that life is worth living. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, weighted with months of restrained emotion finally released. When they pulled apart, both were crying and smiling simultaneously. Outside the studio windows, the Brooklyn afternoon continued its ordinary rhythm, unaware that two people had just chosen each other against all logic, all expectation, all safe and reasonable paths. 6 months later. The private garden in Central Park had been transformed into an intimate wedding venue. White flowers climbed trellises specially designed for accessibility. 50 guests, carefully selected friends and family who had proven their support, sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle. Julian's favorite music played softly in the background. Theodore stood at the altar, supported by specialized braces and sheer determination. Robert stood beside him as best man, ready to offer assistance if needed but knowing Theodore wanted to meet his bride on his own 2 feet. Sienna walked down the aisle alone, having chosen to give herself away, a symbolic gesture of the independence she would not surrender even in partnership. She wore a simple white dress that allowed freedom of movement, flowers woven through her hair. When she reached Theodore, his legs were shaking from the effort of standing, but his eyes were steady and sure. The officiant spoke about love that transforms, about partnership that empowers, about two people who chose each other not despite their scars but because of them. When Theodore slipped the ring onto Sienna's finger, his hand trembled only slightly. When Sienna said her vows, her voice rang clear and strong across the garden. I promise to see you, always, exactly as you are. To witness your pain without trying to fix it. To celebrate your victories without diminishing them. To love you in your strength and your vulnerability, in your wheelchair and on your feet, in the moments you shine and the moments you struggle. I choose you, Theodore, today and every day forward. Theodore's vows came through tears he no longer tried to hide. I promise to trust you with my whole self, the parts one am proud of and the parts one have tried to hide. To remember that love is not about being saved but about being seen. To build a life with you that honors both our pasts and our futures. You taught me that healing is not about going back to who I was before, but about becoming who I am meant to be. I choose you, Sienna, as my partner in that becoming. When they kissed as married partners, the garden erupted in applause. Theodore lost his balance slightly, and Sienna caught him with practiced ease, both of them laughing into the kiss. It was not perfect. It was real. And real had become more precious than perfection ever could be. The journey continues. Later, at the reception held in the same library where they had held their first session, Theodore gave a speech from his wheelchair. He had stood for the ceremony, but sitting now felt like choice rather than limitation. Julian used to say that life is movement. That staying still is the only real death. I thought I understood him, but I did not. Not until I met Sienna. She taught me that movement is not just physical. It is emotional, spiritual, the constant courage of letting yourself be changed by love. Julian would have loved her. He would have loved seeing me here, happy, whole in ways that have nothing to do with whether I can walk. He raised his glass toward the ceiling, toward Julian's memory, toward the journey that had brought him here. To movement. To transformation. To the people who see us when we forget how to see ourselves. The guests echoed the toast, but Sienna simply crossed to Theodore and kissed him gently, a promise that needed no words. Outside the windows, New York City continued its relentless forward motion. Inside the library, two people who had been broken and scared had chosen to be whole together, creating something new from their shattered pieces. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be bad days, difficult moments, ongoing challenges physical and emotional. But they would face them together, two dancers learning new choreography, two souls teaching each other that love is not about being complete, but about being honest. And in that honesty, they had found something neither expected but both desperately needed. They had found home in each other. And home, they discovered, had nothing to do with standing or sitting, success or failure, perfection or imperfection. Home was simply the place where you were seen, accepted, and loved exactly as you were. That was the greatest healing of all. The end.